as a child, probably 18 months, how I would stand at the big window we had in the front of the house and watch for my dad and start pounding on the window, you know, when I saw him come. And my grandmother had a dance hall. And my folks like to tell me, and particularly my uncle liked to tell me, how they were sitting playing cards one night, and I was upstairs, and I came to the banister and looked through, and I heard them talking about the dance, and I said, "Mama's dance, pretty good dance." I say, "Oh boy," and they thought that was hilarious, of course, for that age.
Right.
And so then I do remember, of course, that was Depression years. Although my dad had a pretty good job and was able to work even a little later than some of the other people in Muncie. But I do remember hearing talk of bathtub gin and those good things. I remember once my dad got drunk, and it was during the day, and of course my mother was absolutely furious with him and was refusing to speak or anything. And I remember he took my hand and walked down the back walk to the little shed where we kept the coal, and carried a load of coal back in and kept saying, Dee Dee loves Daddy. You're not mad at Daddy, are you?" And of course I didn't have any idea what was going on, but
right.
I can look back now and say, yeah, he was a little pixelated that day. And of course it was Prohibition, and so it was anytime you got drunk, you were drinking something that was out of the legal bounds anyhow.
Right.
So that was at that time that I really recall mostly. That was on 12th Street in Muncie, but then we moved over across the park.
Okay, now, do you remember how old you was at this time?
When we moved to, actually, things got a little bit scattered in between there. By the time we left, when I was this child, year and a half, 2 years old, on 12th Street, then my folks had bought a little 3-room shotgun house out in the country, about 5 miles out of Daleville. And so we were out there briefly as I continued to grow up about that time.
Yeah, you remember when the sassiness really started kicking in? Or
I just, I think probably I developed that at an early age, and probably since I was the first child and the first grandchild to my grandmother, they thought it was cute and, sort of fostered that sort of thing. So I didn't ever I never got over my mouthiness, I don't think. But I'm trying to think what it would have been that Mom took a yardstick to my legs once. And I'll tell you what, this was the worst thing my mother could have done to me. I hated her. I absolutely hated her. But I can't remember what brought this occasion up, but she decided that I was acting like a baby, even though I was probably 11 or 12, maybe even 12. Mm-hmm. I was a big kid. And she made me lie down on the bed, on the couch, and she fixed me what they called a sugar tit.
Okay.
And as I recall that, it was just a cloth with a big spoonful of sugar or something, and you had to suck on that thing.
Right.
That's what they gave to babies.
Okay.
They didn't have pacifiers.
So she said, you're going to act like a baby. Well, here, you can be a baby.
Oh, I hated that woman that day.
Yeah.
And of course, I tried to do everything I could not to take the thing, and she stood there and made me,
Right.
Oh, that was terrible. But
so a lot of times around this age, when you're 12 years old or so, you start trying to make sense of the world and your place in it besides the relationship with your parents.
Well, obviously, and of course I always have loved to read and read prodigiously, so I kind of had a look at the world from certainly a far cry from what I was living, and kind of thought the world ought to be that sort of exotic place where everything was like I read in the books.
Right.
Of course it wasn't. But
okay, so you graduated at 18, or I mean, when did you graduate from high school?
well, I graduated from high school when I was. Isn't that terrible? I don't remember. But I
Right.
was
May
in.
I interrupt, Diane?
Yes, you may, honey.
Dave, remember, she left school and got married at 16.
Oh, okay. Left school and got married at 16. Well, that's going to be a fantastic learning experience. That's going to supersede high school. That's going to kick it up to the next level here. So, anyways, what was going through your mind, at that point?
In 1941, we went to war.
Yeah.
And the man that I had been dating and had loved for a long time, he was 6 years older than I.
Right.
When we remodeled our little 3-room shack out in the country,
Yeah.
his dad was a carpenter,
Right.
and he came out with his dad and helped him do various little things with him. And I fell for him then, and I was probably 6 or 7, and he was 13 or 14.
Okay. Right.
And I can remember that he, of course, times were tough then, and people didn't wear shoes, so he was out in the field, and he cut his foot badly.
Yeah.
And I can still see my mother bringing the wash pan full of water out and putting it under the big maple tree, and can see his foot going into that water and staining it red. And of course, that made my sympathy even more so.
Yeah.
And then when I got to, of course, we didn't see each other again for several years, but when I went to Yorktown School then, he was a senior the year I was in the 7th grade.
Right.
And, but I was very much taken with him. I'd kind of fallen for him when I was a little kid, and then I still liked him, and he was good looking and all those things.
So at this point, you felt like you've been given a direction, and you know kind of where you're
I know.
headed. You felt like you knew where you was going at this point.
I know now, looking back, that I was far too young to think all that, but yes, that's what I thought.
Right.
I thought that I was. And then, of course, as I say, we were going to war, and by the time I was 16, I thought, I can't let this person go to war. He had joined the National Guard, and but he had gotten he had gotten called. He'd gotten his 1A card, and he was called to go to Indianapolis and take his exam. But I said, by the time that he actually did all that, I had been such a brattish person that I had given him stomach ulcers. So they didn't take him.
Oh.
But of course, I didn't know that was going to happen.
I don't
In
think
the
you can
meantime-
shoulder all the blame on that for that. There's got to be some other stress factors going on just besides that.
Well, in the meantime, I'd quit school and got married because I didn't want him to go to the... In fact, sometimes, if you were married, you didn't have to go.
Right.
But of course, we were in such a big war that
yeah.
that didn't matter.
Sacrifice was expected from everyone.
In my 20s, I can't remember much. I had, of course, begun my family. Karen was born, in 1943, and Susan in 47, and Chris in, 50 or 51, and Cinda in 52 or 3, and then Brett not until 59. And so I was pretty busy. Also during those latter years, I did take the job I ran for office on the town board, got that. And then I actually, before I ran for office though, the people on the board, they had elected a gal to be clerk treasurer, and when she went in and saw what a job it was, she didn't want it. So they needed someone, and they asked me if I would want to do that.
Right.
So I first got into politics by taking that job.
Yeah.
And then I was precinct committeeman, which always, made that a busy time whenever it was time for election.
Right.
And actually, I guess I was just pretty busy trying to keep the books balanced down at the office, because I did have somebody coming in from the state to check them every once in a while.
Right.
And raising kids, I guess. Sometime in that, I tell you, it's terrible. I really wish that I had taken time to write down, try to think when all this did happen. And wanted to be a teacher. That's what I always said I wanted to do, was be a teacher.
Right.
And actually, they did, my principal, who knew me from being in high school, would call me in to substitute once in a while, even before I had gone to college.
Right.
And so I knew I would love teaching.
Yes.
And one day the principal came to my door and opened it, and he said, "Mrs. Mann, some gentlemen want to see you in the office." And I walked in, and my son, who was 16 years old, was sitting in a chair and tear-stained, and I immediately thought that he had had some problems. And
now Tom drove a truck, right? Yeah.
And and I think that's what I said. Oh, honey, what's the matter? And of course he was crying. He couldn't talk. And they told me that my husband had been killed in a truck accident. And I remember what I said. I said, "This will kill his mother." And I really didn't think that Grandma Bertha would be able to take it.
Yeah.
She managed to weather through it, but she was never the
Right.
same afterwards.
Oh, no.
You never are.
Yeah.
And so then I had kids that had to be told, and Karen, of course, lived in Fort Wayne, and I was worrying about her hearing it, and she did. Somebody called her and told her before I got the chance to call her, and so it was. That was a terrible, terrible time, but it was sort of precious that almost all my students came to the funeral home.
Right.
And I thought that was I thought that was sweet of them.
Yeah. In your life.
Well, of course, that's been probably utmost in my life. And I often think of the night that I don't recall what the circumstances were. I just don't recall what the circumstances were, but I felt completely beaten down, and I assumed that I was kneeling, but I don't know for sure that I was. And I said, "Oh Lord, I can't go one step further." And I felt a physical touch. And so from that time on, whenever I heard Bill Gaither's song, he touched me. I knew that he did touch me. There was no doubt about that. I knew that I was touched. And my life filled with joy and happiness and just difficult to describe.